Thank you for giving us your time. What are the
Thank you very much for having me.
We're glad you could make it. Talk to us about the key legal arguments presented by the appeal court in halting the enforcement of Sanusi's reinstatement.
Well, if you want to get the most of today's ruling, it is not actually a judgment, it's a ruling of the court, and ruling and judgment are two different things. So if you want to get the most of today's ruling, one has to understand two previous...
Please, before you go further, could you explain the difference between a ruling and a judgment? Because, I mean, one would expect anything from the court is an order.
Yeah. In the legal parlance, a judgment is the final judgment, deciding the rights and obligation of the parties, while a ruling could be an opinion of the court with regards to a juncture or a point in the proceedings. So what the court has done today is to simply give its opinion to the interlocutory appeal, because it is important to understand that the ruling today is on an interlocutory appeal, not even a substantive appeal. And that is the more reason why it should be called a ruling of the court. But both ruling and a judgment are opinions of the court, only that one finally determines the rights and obligation, and the other one merely pronounces on a juncture of the case.
So what's the implication of this ruling on the case? Because it is a complex one.
It is a complex one, and I think to simply simplify whatever has happened today, one has to cast his mind back to at least two previous set of events that have taken place before now. You could all remember before now that I will just talk about one of the judgments, because there are two judgments that there were two cases at the trial court, one before the Kano State High Court and the other one before the Federal High Court. But I will only talk about the one before the Federal High Court because it is the one that has to do with today's ruling of the Court of Appeal. You all remember that sometime last year, the Federal High Court has set aside any step taken by the Kano State government in reinstating the Emir of Kano, Sanusi, Emir Sanusi. Forgive me by saying Emir of Kano. Currently, you cannot actually tell who the Emir of Kano is. So by Emir of Kano here, I mean Sanusi, Emir Sanusi. The court set aside his reinstatement because, according to the court, there was an order directing the Kano State government to go back to the status quo antebellum before the passage of the new law, which, according to the court, Kano State government flouted that order, and that was why the Federal High Court said any step taken by the Kano State High Court in reinstating Emir Sanusi was null and void. That was one thing that we should all understand. Another development was that this ruling was appealed by the appellant, who is Aminu Babada, who is a kingmaker, and it is that appeal that culminated into another ruling that was passed earlier this year, I think in January, by the same Court of Appeal, saying that the ruling of the Federal High Court, which nullifies the reinstatement of Sanusi, was done without jurisdiction, meaning Federal High Court had no business dabbling into chieftaincy matter. And so for that reason, the order nullifying Sanusi's reappointment was null and void. Now, this same ruling, which is an interlocutory one, has been appealed by Aminu Babada Abuja to the Supreme Court. You understand what I mean? So after appealing this, the same appellant now went back to the court and applied for what we call stay of execution. And stay of execution here means, even though the court is of the opinion that the Federal High Court had no jurisdiction last year when it nullified the reinstatement of Sanusi, the appellant was praying to the court to pause or to halt giving any credence or giving effect to the Court of Appeal's January decision saying that the Federal High Court had no jurisdiction, and to, await the opinion of the Supreme Court. And that is what the Court of Appeal today had granted by saying, yes, even though there's a ruling saying that the Federal High Court had no jurisdiction, but everybody has been ordered not to give effect to that ruling pending the outcome of the appeal before the Supreme Court. So that is in essence what has happened today. On one hand, you have Emir Sanusi saying the nullification of my reinstatement has been voided by the court, and therefore he's a winner there. And on the other hand, you have, the other Emir, Adu Bayero and Babada Agundi, who is the appellant there, saying, although you have this judgment, or this ruling which has nullified your reinstatement, that ruling cannot be given credence. No effect can be given to that ruling pending the outcome of the appeal before the Supreme Court. And in essence, this means right now, the two sides should exercise restraint and should maintain status quo pending the determination of the appeal before the Supreme Court.
All right, I really needed to let you explain that in detail for us to understand a bit as much as we can. But talk to us about the implication for the governance, this tussle itself. How does it impact the role and autonomy of traditional rulers like emirs within Nigeria's legal and political framework?
Well, this is a bit quasi-legal. It's not entirely legal, but I will answer by saying that the traditional institution has been a long-standing one. It has a very long-standing history in Nigeria, and it only benefits everybody in this country if the institution itself is allowed to cleanse itself and to supervise itself. Personally, I do not even like the idea of allowing state governments of elected officials dabbling into an institution as serious and as important as the traditional institution, because you see politicians taking side with some of these traditional rulers who have a lot of influence over the life of the common man. And so generally, if I were to give an advice to the policy makers, I would advise the establishment of a situation where the traditional institution is allowed to function itself without external influence and especially political influence.
All right, let me go back a bit to the case and just ask you something that Justice Okon Abang emphasized. Emphasized that preserving Sanusi's rights as a former emir who served, he emphasized right about that, who served for 5 years. How significant is this argument in shaping the court's decision?
Well, what I read from elsewhere was that Aminu Adu Bayero was the one that served for 5 years. I'm not sure whether the judgment actually mentioned, if my records are clear, it mentioned Aminu Adu Bayero, who was appointed in 2019 and sacked, or let me say purported to be sacked, by council government in 2024. So that is it, but like I said, the full certified true copy of the judgment is not yet out, and I have seen a lot of contradictory reports. But being someone that has given a lot of opinion and interpretation of this judgment before now, this is a judgment that I have followed closely, and it's a judgment that I think I have the appropriate and the requisite knowledge and information to comment about, and that's why I'm doing this. So actually, it is Aminu Adu Bayero who has served for that much, and it is him who the court feels should be given, the hearing, to have his case argued, even though he's not the appellant there, but he's the direct beneficiary of that appeal before the Supreme Court right now.
All right.
So that is my understanding.
I'm told we're out of time for this conversation, but I want to squeeze in this one. Just to be clear, there is no legally recognized Emir of Kano today. Because there are two judgments, and like I told you, I only commented about the judgment of the Federal High Court. There's another judgment of the Kano State High Court, which also has its own legal implication. But if I am to say my mind and to comment about my understanding of the implication of today's ruling of the Court of Appeal, I will tell you that both of these emirs have some stake in the emirship of Kano, or in the claim of the throne of Emir of Kano, and both of them right now cannot fully place themselves and claim to be the unanimously upheld Emir of Kano. So there's really a legal tussle, which is a very bad one. And by bad, I mean one that will really take some time and which is very complicated. So, but it is the long and short of it is that the two of them should maintain status quo and pending what the Supreme Court will say.
Abba, thank you very much for that very extensive analysis. We appreciate it.